So we have Dr. Marya Schechtman of the University of Illinois at Chicago, chairperson of the philosophy department, and distinguished LAS professor.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Also author of The Self, part of a very short introduction series. This is your most recent publication, is that right?
It's my most recent book.
And then you have articles and this is quite recent, isn't it? Isn't it like 2021?
Yeah, it may be even more recent than that. It's
2024. Okay, yeah. Okay.
2021 is probably when I started it. So.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, it's an absolute honor. Thank you very much for this conversation. Okay, so I was saying that we could start with what I typically ask people in the street. Started doing that in Warsaw, did a number of countries in Europe, and now a bit here. And I hope to talk more about that later in our discussion. Okay, question number one. What are you?
What am I? That is a really good question. I am a person.
A person. Very good. Can you point to yourself as specifically as you feel comfortable?
Point to myself.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And you're pointing to the whole body here.
Well, I was just thinking about that because nobody's ever asked me to do that before. Yeah. And then I was thinking, I think I'm pointing to either my face or my head. Okay. Does that say something? Yeah. And would I have pointed differently if we were doing a street interview and I was standing up? So.
Right. Good questions. Can you answer some of those?
Yeah, I think probably, in some sense I'm pointing to this whole thing, which I would call a person, but, it's a human being, but, an organism, but not just an organism, all of those things. Probably if I had to choose a place that I was pointing, and that's why I was wondering, did I somehow choose pointing, face? I think we associate people with their faces. For sure. Or it could be my, brain, head, skull, because partly because that's sort of the vantage point from which I see the world, partly because I'm a philosopher and that's my, main tool.
Yeah.
And then the standing up versus sitting down, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
very good. All right, that's excellent. This is a really great place to start. Okay, so So this is the same question. Can you list your materials?
My materials that I'm made out of.
Right.
Well, that's hard because as a philosopher, I hear material as limiting me to physical stuff. And so my materials are all the lovely biochemicals that make me up, but organized in a very specific way.
Yeah.
But if materials are more like if you asked an artist what their materials were, meaning something like...
They might mean experience.
Well, or they might say the stuff I need to use to create this thing. Right. And then if the question is, what do I need to create me, the materials are thoughts and experiences and other people.
Okay. Yeah. All right, very good. So materials include the biochemical processes, but it's certainly not limited to that. It also involves your environment, your interactions, your relationships, expectations, and so on. Okay.
And it's interesting that you put it that way, because in philosophy, it would be a question whether a process, you said biochemical processes, right? Whether the process itself is a material, or whether just
or
the
if it's
stuff.
the event of materials, or the...
Right, if it's the thing the materials are doing or undergoing,
or what they're prepared to do, maybe, something like that.
Right. So, there are very few people who would identify themselves with just the chemicals,
Right.
like whatever way they were arranged or
Right.
whatever they were doing.
Right. Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Were you adding something to that? I feel
No,
like
I
cut
think,
you off.
well,
Okay.
I was thinking about, identity over time, but let's get to that
Okay,
later.
all right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, 3, and this is more the same question, just using another word, sort of, and so the answer will be slightly different, but it's kind of getting it at the same thing. What are your mechanisms?
Yeah. So there we get the processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. These are really great questions
Oh,
because
thank
this is
you,
not
thank you.
usually how I get asked about the self.
Okay,
It's like what
great.
constitutes the self, what
Yeah.
constitutes its identity over time. My mechanism.
Do you feel like it's a leading question where I'm sort of limiting the possibilities?
No,
Okay,
it's
that's good.
not that. It's just I'm wondering if I'm thinking, do I think of this as the mechanisms by which I do things, or the mechanisms I employ, or whether it means something more like the mechanisms that
Like the most
constitute me?
fundamental mechanisms of your nature, or that's kind of what the latter possibility was, right?
The sort of like, well, so yeah, I mean, I guess, do you have an example of a mechanism? I know I'm supposed to come up with it, and that's the
Yeah,
point.
sure,
But
yeah. So yeah, so I would be looking at, I wouldn't want to limit myself to this, but my mind would first go to cognitive mechanisms, mechanisms of interpretation, mechanisms of, registration, construction, representation.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I think of mechanisms as the implementation of some sort of intention or purpose.
Okay.
The way you do something. I mean,
Okay.
maybe a purpose puts too much mind in it or something.
Okay, okay, I really like
yeah,
that you said that, okay.
But the way that something happens, like the
Right.
mechanism of a watch, is how you explain how it does what it does. And so saying what my mechanisms are is a way of saying how I do what I do, which raises the question of, well, what do I do? And then
What do you do?
I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like, like I maintain homeostasis. That's
Sure,
one thing. And there's
yeah.
a lot of mechanisms of that.
Right.
Physical homeostasis. I don't know about the
Right.
rest of it, but
Right.
yeah. I teach, I write, I have, interactions with people. I play the saxophone.
Oh, very cool. Oh, that's cool.
And I started really recently, so
Okay,
really late
great.
in life, and it's really fun. So, I mean, but I have different mechanisms for how I do all of
Sure.
those things.
Yeah.
And they rely on different levels of abstraction, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, so would you describe yourself, and this is the last of the general questions, then I have a few questions about reasoning, and then that's the gist of the interview that I typically do. What is your relationship to the massive neurons in that skull?
Well, they're certainly one of my important mechanisms.
Sure, yeah.
I do not identify myself with the massive neurons, but I also don't identify my body with the massive cells that make it up.
Okay.
Cells are always dying and growing and
Sure, right.
changing, and some cells that are in my body doing work are not actually maybe part of the organism at all,
Right.
like microbial, bacteria or something.
Right.
So it's not that I think that I'm something distinct from all of this. And in my view, all of this, physical stuff in a context, in a social context, in a natural environment, right? Can't have an organism without a natural environment. Where's it going to, get nutrition from? And so, like, I think all of that is part of me, and I don't think that I am reducible to some clear, set of things that happen. But I also don't necessarily think I'm anything above and beyond, right? So I don't identify with the mass of neurons for sure, because there's like a lot of other stuff going on. Why not identify with my heart or,
Right.
my liver or something? They all
Okay.
do a lot of good work.
Okay.
So, but also why not identify with my social roles, and why not? So,
Right.
like, the mass of neurons is really important, but I think it's only a piece of the big story.
Okay. So one thing I just finished this Losing Ourselves by Jay Garfield.
Yeah, which I have not read. So
Right.
you'll
No,
tell
no,
me
no,
about
no,
it.
not a
Yeah,
problem. It's, when I first started reading it, so he is an illusionist, right? And so he thinks that the illusion of self is pernicious. And so I thought that you two would disagree. And then as I read more of this, and then after that went back to this, you two are basically completely aligned. I don't know that you would check all of this, like agree with all of the same statements before a conversation, but I think that first of all, a lot of what you have said appears here as well.
Right.
And then second of all, yeah, I think there's a difference between the concerns with the implications of certain statements, but sort of the truth of those statements or the value of those statements, I think you two are really aligned on. Okay, so to finish this this material, this mechanism question, what is producing these answers?
I am.
Okay, very good.
Um,
What could I change? What's the simplest way for me to wreak the most havoc on your ability to respond to me, or even like,
render me unconscious somehow.
very good, yeah, yeah, okay. Because I'm thinking about, you said, why identify with a brain more so than a heart? And I'm thinking about how, well, Broca's areas in the brain.
Right, but if you stop my heart, I'm not going to answer any of your
That's true.
questions, because
Yeah.
my brain won't get any oxygen.
Right.
I mean, but I
Unless-
don't think that the brain is the thing. I think the whole system is the thing.
Yeah. And I'm speaking from, I was really convinced, by the pair of these to think of us as persons and not think of us as reducible to brains. But for years leading up to preparing for this interview, I thought that the most accurate and valuable thing is to identify as a brain.
And I don't want to pretend that I don't understand why, and I don't
Yeah.
feel the pull of that, because
Yeah.
I do.
Okay,
And
yeah.
No, I mean, it's obviously, right?
Right. Okay.
And so
yeah.
that's why, I'm answering this way, but it doesn't mean that I don't see what's behind your questions.
Okay, very good. So, so this is maybe more what's behind my questions. So, of course, so what does reasoning? My guess is that you would say that it could be described as mostly the brain, but it's in the context of the society, the standards, the norms, the expectations, the experiences, and so on.
I think that, and I think it's not just like, so one way you could say that is, like, if there weren't society and if there weren't culture and so on, we wouldn't be talking about reasoning. Maybe, right, we would not get the right kind of synaptic pruning as little kids to reason and so on. So that's a sort of causal story about why
Society has to be
reasoning
included.
requires all of this context. But I think in the day-to-day, in real time, yeah, the reasoning is in some sense clearly happening in the brain. I mean, I know what you mean by that when you say that, but we get a ton of feedback, and the feedback is in real time, and it comes from the rest of our body, it comes from other people, it comes from the environment, and we wouldn't be able to do anything we recognize as reasoning, I would say, in at least in its sort of normal meaning, without all of that giving us. I mean, I think there's this sort of huge feedback loop that's always operating. So it's not just like you needed to have this thing to get reasoning going. Now, like philosophers like to think about, but once you've got it going, couldn't you have a brain in a vat that was doing mathematics or many other kinds of thought experiments where you're saying, but like really all you need is the brain. And I just don't find those convincing, because you don't just need the brain. You need the brain in a vat of nutrients, and it needs to be connected to something that gives it inputs, and it needs to be connected to something through which it can output, so that we could know that it was reasoning. And so basically, the question there isn't could a brain on its own reason. The question is what kind of context is the minimum or something to do anything that we could identify as reasoning.
That we could recognize.
It doesn't need all of what we have, because we do a bunch of different kinds of reasoning and a bunch of other things that aren't reasoning.
Right.
But so to just do like math problems or logic problems or something, maybe you need considerably less.
Right.
But the question is how little, but not that just a brain could do it. And then I also wonder about the other way around, and philosophers love these sci-fi thought experiments, and they differ on this question, and what if they could give you a prosthetic brain, right? Like, what if they just said, hey, we know how to make a really, really complicated device that can do what the brain does in terms of inputs and outputs, then you might still think you could reason and live and so on, in that it would just really be like having a prosthetic heart doing the blood pumping for you. It could keep the same functions going, but people would be a lot less tempted to say that their thinking was happening in the brain, or that the choices were being made in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to. I'm trying not to put too much pressure on myself to get all of my questions answered. We'll have another conversation, I hope, and I can get to think about some of these as well, especially that prosthetic brain thing. Okay, so last question of the interview. Normally I would ask about what it means to be rational and how you judge your reasoning, but I think I want to leave that out for now. And I just want to ask, can you, and this is what I typically ask people, can you give the common names or the established names of some common cognitive errors?
So I should, because like I told you to read that book, but so there's, I forget what they're called. I always forget the names of things, right? But there is the standard one. So one, when you're teaching logic or something, that people always do is something like, affirming the consequent or something. So
right.
So if you say,
Who are negating the antecedent.
Right. Yeah. So you think that things have implications they don't have, but the kinds of things that cognitive psychologists like to talk about are one of the famous ones is the one where you're told a story about
Linda problem.
Linda, yeah, and she's right.
And that's one of the 4 cornerstones for Kahneman, I think, is representativeness, and that's a case of representativeness.
Yeah. So Linda was an activist and in college or whatever, a feminist and so on, and then you've got this list of what she most likely to be later, and one thing on the list is bank teller, and one is bank teller and feminist, and people think it's more probable that she'll be a bank teller and feminist because, she was
she's
a
more
feminist,
representative. The story's more representative.
But
that's a conjunction
obviously
fallacy.
It's a conjunction fallacy. However, I think that it's not a mistake at all for someone to think that, really.
Okay. Yeah. So Gerd Gigerenzer is someone who disagreed with Kahneman and thought that there were a lot of advantages. And of course, there are advantages to the heuristics, but that even when they're technically getting it wrong, that they're doing their job. Yeah.
Yeah, and also what I would say is that. So it's not just that they're heuristics, and we all know we need heuristics because we need to think fast a lot of the time. But did you ever hear of Grice, the philosopher Grice?
No.
So he talked about this thing called conversational implicature. And so the idea is there are these certain conventions of conversation that are sort of like not unlike rules of, writing a fictional narrative or something, where if you include something, it should be relevant, right? And so, for instance, one of my favorite examples of this is I got fascinated with advertising a long time ago for some reason. And when I was growing up, there were Certs mints, and every commercial with only Certs has a glistening drop of Retsin added to it.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. And then
I'm sorry, there's a word you're saying that I don't
Certs?
Certs. Is that the brand?
Mint. It's a brand of mints.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
And only Certs has this glistening drop of Retsin. And then one day I looked it up, and on the, there's a little asterisk by
it's not
Retsin.
Really Retsin.
Well, no, it is Retsin.
Okay.
But what the asterisk said is Retsin is our name for vegetable oil.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so this works because people think they're saying it has Retsin. Who the hell knows what Retsin is, right? I certainly didn't.
Right.
But if they're saying it, it must be something that's relevant to its function as a breath mint. But in fact, it wasn't relevant at all, but people attributed it. But I don't think they were making a mistake. I think they were following norms of conversation. Or if I say, there's food in the refrigerator if you're hungry, I don't mean there isn't food in the refrigerator if you're not hungry, right? It's just, this is why it might be relevant to you. And so there are a lot of, there's just a lot of conversation, a lot of the way that we are able to make our meaning known to people that isn't straightforward assertion, but relies on conventions about what you should attend to. And so I think in ordinary life, if someone was telling you about what Linda did in college, it would either be because they're telling you a story about how, and then she got really conservative and now she's just like this, super conservative bank teller or something. Or it would be, and so she had to go to work. Since she's just a teller and not a manager, she's probably never given up her, her, progressive bona fides or whatever. So they're telling you that for some reason, so that you can understand Linda later on. And so if you think about it that way, it's a logical error, but who says logic is going to capture everything
Right.
about what we're communicating.
And that's one thing that Miyazono and Bortolotti talk about is the ecological validity of these
Right.
experiments. And so
Right.
you're saying that it wouldn't,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And also, I think I'm wrong about representativeness. I was thinking about
Yeah.
that as far as whether that's one of the cornerstones. I just want, for the record,
Yeah.
confirmation bias, availability heuristic,
availability.
anchoring, and whizzy-addy, what you see is all there is. I think those are the four, and then representativeness. Is
And
just,
availability, I think, probably is. So in answer to your first question, I forget the names, but I think, the one that we do most of the time really is like, I have a story about someone who had a bad reaction to the vaccine.
And therefore that's a probable thing or what have you. Yeah. Okay. So, here, let me ask you this two-part question. Do you think that there is a rationality problem in the world? Okay. Second question, and because this is what I've taken my mission to be. My mission. So let me. So I guess we're sort of transitioning to talking about why I'm having these conversations. But we have, but so then I'm gonna ask this last question about what you think about what I think would help public reasoning, and then we'll just see what happens. So, okay. How do you define critical thinking?
That's hard. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have a definition of it, but I do think about critical thinking as involving the ability to reflect on your principles of reasoning and decision making, and to evaluate them, and to bring your right. So I think it's
one more time, evolving ability to reflect on your decision
and evaluate, your principles or mechanisms or ways of.
So, based on that definition, I think that maybe you will agree with me, but we'll see what nuances are involved. So I break critical thinking into four things. Each part starts with critical recognition, reflection, research, and then sort of counts resolution. Okay, so critical reflection. This one I'm convinced to modify by what you just said a few minutes ago, and what Gerd Gigerenzer says about how sort of unimportant being technically logical may be to good reflection, or to getting to adaptive or useful conclusions, maybe. So I definitely want to explore that more.
Yeah, I would. We can come back to that if you want after you tell me or we can talk about it now, whichever you. I don't want to leave logical thinking out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So, I mean, that's where I'm starting from anyway. So I'm just thinking about how much I need to stray from that, and I'm convinced to consider straying a bit from that being foundational to the definition. So critical reflection, for now, means thinking in a way that we consider logical. So knowing the informal and formal fallacy, knowing the valid rules of inference and so on. Research, basically scientific method. Okay, so those ones are easy. Recognition I take to be the foundation, and then resolution to be sort of the ultimate goal, which is that I have done reflection and research. I come to a conclusion. How do we discuss it? What is a human-friendly dialectic or something that we can do? Okay. What I think is the foundation to all of this is critical recognition, which means the recognition that that one is, and this is something that I want to modify, but let's say leading up to reading your books, yours and Dr. Garfield's, critical recognition is recognizing that you are a fallible, determined human brain that evolved to survive and reproduce rather than to answer these big questions that it asks itself. So to recognize that fallibility and nature, and then to learn the identified common cognitive errors such that you as a brain are in a better position to recognize those when they happen. So the idea is in here, he talks about, so I'll use system 2 and type 2 processes interchangeably. He talks about different models of the way that type 1 and type 2 processes interact. He talks about the lawyer-client model, where lawyer type 2, and also the default interventionist, where interventionist is type 2. Typically, I think it is lawyer-client. There are a lot of cases, let's say, in which it's a lawyer-client thing. Type 1 process produces an answer, and then type 2 just rationalizes it, elaborates on it, what have you. But I think that's only because type 2 thinks that type 1 is reliable. And so then if brains were to learn about themselves, type 2 processes, well, first of all, you'd be installing type 1 processes, new type 1 processes for certain triggers, right? A member of the outgroup is involved. Oh, wait a minute. Member of the outgroup is involved. That means I might be running in-group, outgroup. Hey, I need to elicit the system 2. So you set up certain alarms just by learning about this. And then also the conditions for the engagement of type 2 processes sort of change or maybe broaden because there's less reliance on the type 1 processes, because system 2 or the system overall understands that we do not live in the same environment. We do not face the same demands in which these processes evolved. And so by being Craig is the adjective for having critical recognition, you know that you're fallible, you've got epistemic, intellectual, interpretive humility, and you are in a position to be able to, as you said, reflect on and evaluate the mechanisms of your interpretation and decision making. And so the last piece of this is, I think it is, or I have thought, maybe I still think that it is useful for people to identify as brains, to pull them away from identifying as these souls that have peculiar knowledge of themselves, that can judge their reasoning reliably,
Okay, I see. So what you're against is the sort of Cartesian picture of, so I'm completely with you on that. I mean, that's not going to be, that's just not, I think, even introspectively viable, honestly.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I think, even like if you stop and thinking about it, it's a shorthand for something. And the question is what it's a shorthand for. So I'm with you about that. But I also think, like, if I really were a brain, like, who cares whether I get it right or not, right? Why does a brain care about getting it right? I care about getting it right because I want to navigate the social and natural world effectively.
But that's your job so if I were to say you're a brain, your job as that organ is to maintain this body and help it survive and get it nutrition. and build its
Right,
relationships.
but here, right. But that builds a lot in
Okay.
about what's going to be right. I mean, that's the whole point of these guys and, a lot of the stuff about heuristics, right? Is that, well, from an evolutionary point of view, you need to do it faster than you can do it in a philosophy class or in a research lab. And so you've got to find ways of doing it fast, which may or may not be logically correct. So when do you need to reflect, right? If you're doing it from a purely naturalistic point of view, right? Either the primary thing is going to be either the genome, which I think is increasingly less, the genes are just humans are just ways for genes to make more genes.
The selfish gene.
The selfish gene thing. I mean, people understand now that there's all kinds of epigenetic input and stuff, so that's too simple. Or it's going to be the organism as a whole, right? And so the brain is an organ, it's an important organ, but the thing that has got to be right or wrong or efficient or inefficient is the organism, right? So the reason that I'm pushing back a little bit on what you're saying, because I think what you're saying is completely compatible with what I think, I just wouldn't phrase it that way, and I'm trying to say why, is that it makes it sound like,
Let me just make sure it's recording.
Yeah.
This is so great. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it gave me a minute to try to think of how to say this. What it makes it sound like. It's something like the organism outside of the brain is just some sort of like prized possession that the brain has to maintain, as opposed to the brain being a part of the whole thing that keeps the organism going. And so this is connected to some of the stuff that I said before about how you get the feedback loop all the time. Like the feedback loop didn't just happen during evolution, and culture changed so much, right? And so I think the point you make about, so the circumstances in which we developed the hardware are not the circumstances in which we live. So like we should have some humility about the assumption that the hardware is just reliable. I absolutely, I agree completely with that. And I think like that has to be taken into account as part of the whole story. But did I talk to you last time about inactivism? And so there's this sort of whole mode in the philosophy of mind, philosophy of psychology. It can be called 4E cognition. It's like embodied, embedded,
enacted. Yes, he talks about this. He talks about this. I know just what you're talking about.
And sometimes people say inactivist. So right. So the idea is cognition is a much bigger.
Right.
Right.
And Andy Clark has the extended mind.
Yeah, it's like the extended mind thing. And so part of the way that the brain is, so when do you critically reflect? Well, you do if you take a critical thinking class and you got to get, the grade in it, or you do if you're curious. But in the first instance, you get pushback from either the world or other people.
Yeah. Sorry, what do you mean?
That you've made a mistake. Like,
okay. Right.
You assumed something. You said, right, no, COVID's a hoax. And then you get COVID and you're like, oh, wow, I guess, my reasoning about it being a hoax was faulty, and now you know, right? But
that doesn't happen, what you just said.
It doesn't happen? Oh, I think it does.
I mean, I don't think it's a representative case. I'll put it that way.
So let's not, right. Okay, so here's the thing.
Okay.
Maybe this is a way of putting it. Here's another way of putting it. Where is this humility going to come from? for someone who is not committed to critical thinking, it's not going to come from being shown evidence that they evolved and, and it was like
fear of embarrassment.
the Pleistocene, or, right, it's going to come from fear of embarrassment or harm or status, or, right, you're going to be out there and you're going to say, so here is something that maybe does actually happen. I take your point, and I want to come back to it.
No, and maybe that was nitpicking. Maybe
no, because I know what you're worried about. It doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, right.
Right now at this moment. I mean, there was a time, and I don't know how much politics you want in your podcast.
No, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, but I mean,
so go ahead.
That right now, I'm so thrilled that people seem to care that something that was shown to be an out-and-out lie was an out-and-out lie, instead of just saying, okay, so what? This is what I'm saying. I don't care what that video shows, right? I mean, it just shows that you should be relieved that somehow, this evidence is
compelled some
people. So, but a couple of things to say about that. So I think we've got a problem, and I'm so glad that you're out there trying to figure out what to do about it.
I guess that's thank you.
But I mean, I guess two things to say. One is just the thing I said before, that where did this recognition come from? Something like poll numbers, this recognition that we should take video evidence at face, like what we see with our eyes at face value, comes more from polls than from any recognition. And also, I've heard some interesting stuff just in talks around people this about how reflection, bad critical thinking can do the exact opposite, right? Because we could call that rationalizing, right?
No, okay, explain this.
Well, so it's sort of like the evidence is never, this is why you like logic, I know, see. The evidence, when you critically reflect, and I was going to push back on resolution because I was going to say philosophers, we never get resolution, right? So the evidence is never completely compelling.
Oh no! Since high school I had this quote. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah.
So when you say this is a really safe vaccine, it's been studied, people are like, yeah, that's what they said about, right? So if you don't already buy in to the idea that but statistics are more important than one example, right?
Right.
Years of statistics will tell you more than one example. If you don't already accept that, this will have no effect on you.
Right. Statistics are only used to arm people that already agree with the conclusion the statistics indicate.
So I think this does not in any way challenge what you said.
Okay.
Except I think, maybe I think it does challenge it. Just in the sense that, so there's two questions. One is just okay, so there's real critical thinking, and then there's a question about what are the best tactics for getting people to do it.
Right.
And I'm talking about
or to
tactics.
Get closer to it.
Yeah, right. And I'm talking about tactics, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to figure out what we want the tactics to result in and why, right? So I agree that's one thing, but I think that it is connected to the feedback loop that I was talking about, and the way in which enculturation has just changed what rationality is and what cognition is, because there's this whole sociocultural world you have to navigate that is way more complex than when, loose family groups of 150 people were living together.
Right.
And it isn't clear we've developed new hardware to do that. We're doing it with the old hardware, which is in some ways your point. But maybe a way of thinking about it is we get feedback in a lot of ways that is connected to the way other people look at us and to whether we get the job or not, or, stuff like that. That is part of this whole social thing, and that is part of the whole loop that sort of Andy Clark and, the 4E people are talking about. And also, we do a lot of important things to navigate the world that aren't reasoning. So that's my hobby horse, right?
Right.
We just
Yeah, experiencing and
right,
relating.
recreation, traveling, broadening your mind through travel, right? And
of course, if we can include, we end up including a lot of things if we just make the move from reasoning to interpreting. So if we look at reasoning as not trying to follow, how I typically define reasoning is trying to follow information to its indicated conclusion. But if instead it's less goal-oriented, if it's just what you do with the information, with your inputs. Well, anyway, so that's an interesting thing. Another thing is that I see my body as, as not being my body, is the possessor. You talked about earlier about the brain possessing the body. I am an organ in this body is how I typically see it. So my body is in a sense the boss. Of course, I have a lot of command. But ultimately, I answer to the body. That was just a little thing which might.
Yeah. So okay. So you are an organ in a body, and if the organ could be kept alive outside of the body, that's just fine for you. There wouldn't be much to reason about anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to.
What if you had a different boss?
Yeah. So, I'm gonna think about that and maybe respond to that in an email, in like a summary email after. The other thing that I wanted to say we're really aligned on is that, so far my idea is I would love to try to see people realizing that that intelligence isn't binary, sentience isn't binary. It's not like you have reason and rationality and so on, that it's all the product of these mechanisms about which we should be humble, that a few people can become interested in that, learn about that, and then you have a few good examples of that, and then the cultural norms follow, and then that's what convinces the public.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, hold on. You don't even know Wizziati? Hold on. Did you just say my gut said this and I should always listen to my gut?
Yeah.
That's so embarrassing. Wow, okay, excellent.
So I have a question for you. A quick question.
It's 11:55.
Just a quick one.
Okay.
So
I mean, I'm in no rush. You just said.
Yeah, I have to enter things into a spreadsheet.
Fine. Okay.
Which this is way more fun than that. But why are you so trusting of reason, which is a product of the brain that developed?
I don't know. I don't think I am trusting of reason. I think it's like our best bet.
Okay.
But I don't trust anything a human brain does.
Okay. All right. So humility is the main message.
Humility is the main message.
I am 100% on board with you about that. Humility and listen to people. You might learn something.
Exactly.
Yeah. No.
Right.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, and that's why the critical resolution, an individual can't resolve a question.
Yeah.
They can get closer, and then with someone else, they can get much closer. Of course, we can never get to, and know that we've gotten there, but yeah, that I want it to be standard in our culture where two people are conversational partners, because we know that it's easier for us to see the errors in someone else, right? And so two people who trust each other that are partners, and I can say, oh, that's an example of the halo effect, or what have you.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot, and I like your definition a lot. And I'm just smiling because I'm thinking of teaching philosophy to beginning undergraduates. I'm like, you're so picky, and you're always saying I'm stupid. I'm like, I'm not saying you're stupid. Like, give it back.
Right, yeah.
Because I'm doing it too.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's harder for me to see it. I need your help. Yeah.
And once you learn it, you'll be able to tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's and then another thing, I want to have a rule that I don't even really discuss things with people unless first of all they know how fallible their cognition is, and second of all that they're in a position where there's any potential of them noticing their own or my errors. Okay. I think I'm going to include that in the email. So I'll let you get to it. So much. Let me just
you can ask it.
leave off with something. I
Yeah.
actually want to show you something.
Yeah, I like your definition of critical.
Thank you very much. That's
it's helpful.
honestly, my eyes are going to start welling up. So here's my metaphor, my framework for the mind that I want you to give some thought to, or I'll mention it in the email, and we can talk about it more next time. So I don't want to. I'm not trying to give you homework or ask you to, but great. So I think I phrased that okay. Moving on. So I think so if we think of the brain, the sort of the fundamental unit of the brain, we could say it's maybe the neuron, maybe the synapse. In either case, it's a sort of a node in the cause effect web. And so, well, first of all, my symbol for the unit of the mind is that's an it. It stands for if then. It's very, very simple. Basically, just thinking of every unit of the mind as a condition consequent pairing, and then they
mind or brain, or they're the same for you?
So I'll stick with mind, but yeah, I do think because of supervenience, because of the way that that it's
fair.
Yeah. So condition consequent, and so for instance, what I've been doing is there's a group in France that's working on a taxonomy of cognitive errors, and as part of that effort, I had some success translating every cognitive error as either an it. Gosh, I obviously I'm tempted to. Okay, one moment. So let's put it this way. So your its, you have in any given context, an it could be maybe described as either a mallet or a bonnet, maladaptive or more adaptive, more relevant to the situation. And then, so let's say the halo effect. So that's my symbol for if. If a person is attractive and no other information had and no other info, then person is intelligent, right? And then you can sort of imagine a network of all of these pairings interacting, where one consequent is can maybe fulfill the condition for the next it, and so this way you have this distributed self, and you can even talk about this it is saying this, this it is saying this. They're not talking to any central figure, right? The self is really distributed across the activity of all of those. So that's a little glimpse into a metaphor that I've been using with the people around me, and that I think gets me closer to people looking to evolution to understand their cognition. You know, what could I expect to be active in this situation given the environment my ancestors evolved in? Anyway, so that, and then the last thing is, and then I have the Warsaw illusions, which I would love some feedback on, which is the 6 categories of illusions that minds have about mind: will, essence, singularity, unity; rationality, that we have some pure capacity for that; sense, that's perception as well as judgment, intuition, things like that; sense outside, sense inside; attention and storage. And so then emotion and morality are 2 other candidates for my list. But anyway, so that's some of the
we'll
stuff
have to talk about it. I think at some point, I mean, it'll be a little while because I'm really busy, but we'll have to talk about what illusion means.
Yeah, very good.
Because I think that's really maybe the only place that I've got a disagreement. Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting, and I'm thinking you might be interested in, you might not. It's by now an old book, but there's a book by Merlin Donald, if you haven't heard that name, called A Mind So Rare.
Okay.
And this was one of the early evolutionary psychology people where he's talking about the origins of consciousness and of sense of self coming out of evolution in ways that might be interesting to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, this has been such a pleasure, Dr.
Yeah,
Schechtman.
great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you.